I'm Chris Kelly. I happen to be a member of the Community Care, which is a group that is, in essence, the catalyst for having a conversation. Really thrilled tonight to be able to offer a session that is geared towards veterans, but especially pleased to be able to introduce you to the group that's going to be facilitating the session tonight. I'd like to introduce you to Justine Ginsburg, who is the Executive Director of the Resilience Grows Here, as well as the Community Health Coordinator for Farmington Valley Health District, right? So she has many roles. This organization provides a very unique but effective approach to assisting veterans and is working to really integrate their efforts into the 10 valley towns of the Farmington Valley Health District. And so we're really pleased tonight to have an opportunity for them to speak to you and provide some assistance to the community. So Justine, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. A small but mighty crowd.
Yes.
All right, so to those at home, welcome. And we've had a few technical glitches, which is why we're going to be doing show and tell in a slightly different way, but that's okay. So thank you very much for having us and for organising this, particularly as Veterans Day approaches. A lot of people forget the true meaning behind Veterans Day and they forget the true meaning behind Memorial Day. Tonight we're very fortunate to have a number of our Resilience Grows Here team with us to serve on a panel to answer some questions about what it actually is like to walk in those shoes. We have been blessed with a grant from the Movember Foundation, a $1.5 million grant that we received nearly 5 years ago. We're coming to the end of our 5th year of grant custodianship, and we've been able to build something incredible. One of the many things that we do is provide resources to our veterans and communities in which they live. And in the last 3 years, we've trained over 3,500 people in suicide prevention. And as of Friday last week, we've saved 42 lives that we know of, which is unbelievable. And it's not me who saves the lives. I save but a small portion. It's all of my team and all of the men and women who have been trained in suicide prevention training. We've now added mental health first aid training to our cadre of community training plans. We are so blessed and fortunate, she disappeared behind me, to work in partnership with the 103rd Airlift Wing out at East Granby and to work with my dear friend and partner Casey Timberlake, who has an incredible role out at the 103rd. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about what she does and why her role is so vital and why the National Guard is so vulnerable compared to different branches of the military, because they kind of live with a foot in both worlds. They're neither fully deployed and employed with the military, nor are they full members of the community. So they kind of live with this foot in both worlds. So Casey has a really important role and we are so blessed to work with her. I'll let the rest of the panel introduce themselves, but I do want to introduce Lisa Philippon, who is my partner in crime. She is the Resilience Grows Here coordinator. She's also a Gold Star mum. And a veteran. So for those of you that don't know what a Gold Star mum means, Lisa lost her eldest son whilst he was deployed fighting for this country. So Lisa often tells the tale of when she mentions she's a Gold Star mum, people will often give her a round of applause and say, "Wow, great going, mum." They don't realise that it's not a Gold Star for motherhood, it's having a family who has paid the ultimate price. So on both Memorial Day and Veterans Day, all those who have served are very cognizant of those who have served and not returned, and those who have served and returned and are still struggling here. So that's some of what we'll talk about tonight. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to a video that you now all have to huddle and get really close to one another. Our funders are backed by a number of organisations, including one called the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. provide the audience with the YouTube title of the video. Okay, that was not very professional, was it? And I hope there's not I'm assuming there's not a camera on me so no one saw me read it. Okay. So for those at home, I'll give you a moment to get it up on your screen. So if you put into your search engine, coming home, Resilience Grows Here, YouTube, you will find an 11-minute and 3-second video that's been put out by the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. The Distinguished Gentleman's Ride is an Australian-based group that last year raised nearly $4 million for men's health. They donated a portion of that to the Resilience Grows Here initiative. Earlier this year, they flew a television crew out from Australia, and we were so blessed, and you are blessed tonight, to meet Ben Granger, who is a Marine and is a local hero in the way he brings his Marines home. Many Marines come home and have been home many years and are still struggling to find their feet. And Ben and a group he's associated with, the Valhalla Motorcycle Group, are unbelievably dedicated to ensuring that our heroes have a space where they can be heard, when they can be supported, and when they are struggling the most, that their brothers and sisters can wrap their arms around them and ensure that they get the supports in coming home. And Ben is one of my real life heroes because of the work that he does. And we were very fortunate to have him throw open his home and the Valhalla Motorcycle Group throw open their club for this film crew to come and spend 3 days of intense filming. Please come and join us. 3 days of intense filming. I think the guys from the Valhalla Motorcycle Group enjoyed it an awful lot because they got to ride their bikes a lot. And the guys from the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, who travel the world making videos about mental health and well-being, to this day say it is the #1 story that they have done that has changed both of their lives. And these 2 young Australian men have gone home and still speak of the fact that there is something about this organisation and there's something about the Valhalla Motorcycle Group and Ben that they have never seen anywhere else in the world. So we are incredibly proud of this piece of reporting, I suppose. So I'm sorry it's on a small screen. Gather round, my friends.
Wars aren't like TV. That's the hardest thing I think it is for the mind to comprehend. And you really see that what you're killing isn't the bad guy, he's another person. So I got on the plane, I left Iraq, I left the war zones, I left Fallujah City, the invasion. All the burnt bodies, people with missing arms, legs, half their faces, I'm gonna leave it there. It doesn't stay there, it doesn't not get on the plane with you. You're trying to put it into a box, black box with chains, and you're trying to keep those chains locked instead of going to seek help. Something triggers it, where that memory comes back. You can't unsee what you saw, but it's okay to be screwed up. It's okay, we don't have to hide it anymore.
PTSD is not a disorder. PTS is the most normal response to the most abnormal circumstances. And there's an enormous stigma with mental health in this country. In America, when you look at the risk factors for suicide for our veterans, a lot of that stems from not being able to access mental health services early enough when they need it.
I will still say in the military, and I've been retired for 10 years, you wouldn't dare say you had a mental issue. I can't go to combat, I can't take care of my friends, I can't cover their asses. Two, if you came out, you're pretty much done in the military.
When you're in service, there are still obstacles to self-disclosure. For certain career fields, a pilot, they cannot have a mental health condition. When we're serving, the public wants us to be healthy. And so people still hide their mental health.
My husband got out of the Marine Corps and lost that identity and wasn't sure where to turn. And it was easy for him to fake it while he was still within the service. But out of the confines of that camaraderie and out of the confines of that predictability, that's when he started having some difficulty.
You know, the system has failed them many times, so they build up a facade. They know just the right answers to give, so people will stop asking the additional questions.
When someone reaches that point, that's a sad state, you know, for those individuals.
The population that we serve at the Farmington Valley Health District is very high in veterans, and it takes on average 10 years for a person to get help for an underlying mental health condition. When an opportunity for a grant from the Movember Foundation presented itself for us to really create an inventive and outside the square kind of program to work with our veterans and mental health and men's mental health, I jumped at the chance. So Resilience Grows Here was born. One of the most humbling lessons that I learned as a professional is that I don't have all the answers. I can provide the trainings and I can provide the backup and the support, but a lot of the work gets done in communities like the Valhalla Motorcycle Group.
The ones that come here, these young guys, they go to the wars and they hear through the grapevine about the barn because they're looking for another source. The first thing I will say is like, hey, you know, we're all screwed up, right? So they get in that relaxed mode, and then when they start seeing the walls on the faces, we start talking about them individually. That's when they'll break.
And the beauty of RGH and taking that course was it taught us, don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
And when somebody's in trouble, it's all about asking questions. You can't baby them. You can't coddle them. They're in trouble, you need to understand that you have to bring them out of that trouble. And the only way to do that is by being honest with them and moving forward from there.
Because eventually when you bring down the wall, that's when you can open up to help.
When they come in here, we're not saying lay on the couch and tell me how you feel. I've never asked anybody to tell me how you feel. Before they even got here, I already knew how he felt. I already knew what he'd seen. I already know where his mind is. I think that's the difference here. They go to a psychiatrist's office, and I'm not taking anything away from them because they're very valuable. We try to get them to that level next.
So when I met Ben 2 years ago and he reached out to us about some suicide prevention training and peer support training, it suddenly became the natural alliance.
So we build that trust in the people that we trust to take care of them, and we trust the RGH people. We screen who we work with, and we found RGH close by, willing to bend over backwards, because we're talking about somebody's life. We're not talking about another paycheck for a job. It's somebody's life.
Ben brought our son Larry's things home from Iraq, and so that's how we met Ben the first time. And he's come to support our family since Larry was killed.
It's from his heart. He knows exactly what these men and women have been through. He's seen it. He's seen it on the battlefield, and he's seen it when he's had to knock on the doors to let families know that their loved one won't be coming home. and he has to be ready to jump out of bed and run. And he's so respected and so loved. He does it well.
Lisa is the embodiment of what Resilience Grows Here is. Lisa's understanding and ability to talk the language of the families and talk the language of the veterans. This is a woman who has used the greatest personal loss to connect with the community.
It means the world to me to help our veterans. That's just my heart in taking care of them on behalf of my two sons who served, and especially my oldest son, Larry, who gave his life in Iraq.
So when you look at small town America, there's something incredibly unique about how they live and work together. Everybody knows everybody. There are families that have lived in these communities for 300 and 400 years. It's got an incredible feel of connectedness.
So for me, I look at my community as circles within circles. So I belong to the 103rd. I'm an airman. Community is however you define it. Everybody in here kind of take on as my personal responsibility. Because as long as you feel like you belong somewhere, that's the kind of roots that keep you from hurting yourself even when bad things happen.
There is a relief in understanding that this is not just them. This is not just the dirty little secret in their own family, that this is something that is a lot more common than we think that it is. I think the more people like myself and like RGH and the community that they have telling that story, I think we'll see more people raising their hand and saying, me too.
Just to know that they have someone that they can call and they can count on, so that at the end of the day, when they lay their heads down on their pillow, they have some hope. And I think that is what Resilience Grows Here is giving them, is hope.
DGR and Movember and their supporters really allow us to do this work that changes lives. In less than 2 years, we've trained 2,000 community members in suicide prevention.
And so there is an awareness that is blooming. Thanks to organizations such as Movember and the distinguished gentlemen riders, we're going to make it happen.
RGH can be a barn, RGH can be a field, RGH can be an office space. And one of the things that our RGH members tell us is it's like coming home.
I know at any time I can call Justine for help. She's going to become embedded in the motorcycle world, and having the RGH right here, which this is a high route for motorcycle rides, it's a win-win, for everybody.
First of all, the true heroes in this world don't wear capes. They don't tend to be marked as heroes. The heroes that exist in our communities are like Ben and Lee and Rich and Casey and Lisa. They drive unmarked cars. They're embedded in our communities, and they care with all their heart and all their soul. And I can talk from personal experience, and I know Casey answers her phone at whatever time of the day or night to help a family in crisis. And I know from personal experience, Ben does the same. And Ben will go where he needs to go, and Ben will get his guys to circle and find one of their brothers that has lost their way and bring them home. And he has saved many a life and asks for nothing in return. And that's what heroism is. So, Do any of you have any questions? Again, it's really hard when you see that on a tiny screen. Any questions from the video? Okay, so before we begin, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and just give you a brief snippet about who they are. And I'm going to have to walk with you because I carry the only microphone. We're joined forever.
Hi, I am Lisa Philippon. I am a Army veteran and a Gold Star mother. I am the program communication and outreach programmer for Resilience Grows here out of the Farmington Valley Health District.
All right, I think I'll come behind because that way I won't obscure your view.
So I am Ben Granger. I actually served a year and a half in the Army National Guard in South Carolina. And then I did 23 years in the Marine Corps. I'm from South Carolina, retired here in Connecticut after coming back from Fallujah. And I run a plant manager down in the Meriden area. I live up in the woods in New Hartford.
Hi, I'm Casey Timberlake. I am the Airmen and Family Readiness Program Manager for the 103rd Airlift Wing in East Granby. But I've been doing this work for about 12 years, working with military families, and I am a Marine Corps spouse.
Come this side.
I'm Rich Timberlake. I did 5 years in the United States Marine Corps and am currently a student.
Hi, I'm Lee Wilson, 8.5 years in the Army, 91 Gulf War, and I'm on the RGH steering committee.
So the one thing you're lucky you don't have anyone from the Navy because then there'd be this little fight that would be going on. I'm sure our Army and our Marine boys and girls can play nice. It's one of the things, I don't have a military background, so it's one of the things that continues to delight me when I have a room full of men and women who've served this country in varying capacities. Their ability to continue to poke fun at one another is magnificent. So it's some of the levity, and I think it's some of the coping mechanisms as well. But when push comes to shove, it actually doesn't matter what colour you wear. The fact is, every one of the men and women that serve this country do exactly the same thing. And I think on Veterans Day, more than ever, we need to think about the fact that all those who serve raise their right hand and they hand over a blank cheque with their name on it, and that's their life. And they're prepared to give that to this country. So if there's one thing you do on Veterans Day, it's my advice, my own personal reflection on Veterans Day is what am I doing to be worthy of that? Because every year men and women lose their lives fighting for our freedom and fighting for our way of life. So rather than just saying thank you for your service on Veterans Day, think about what you are able to do here at home that honours that sacrifice that someone's son or father or daughter or mother has made on your behalf. So, of course I left my questions at the other side of the table. So I thought, is there anything in particular you'd like me to focus on from an audience perspective?
Recidivism on PTSD.
Okay, PTSD.
My background is in Vietnam, and I was involved with a stress unit in Montrose, in New York. And we would have a bunch of guys, most of it Vietnam guys, because it was the early 90s. And they would come, then they'd get lost. We'd come back, and then we'd do what you did, which is we go out and we find them. And now we, actually, since I've moved up here, I'm no longer involved with the Vietnam veterans. But they do have what they call placement services, and they develop kitchen kits, home kits, and they do that type of stuff. But again, it's recidivism. And what I'm worried about now is, all right, we're in our late 60s, 70s, blah, blah, blah. It's the younger guys that have gone not once, not twice, especially the Marines with the 6 and 9 month tours, whatever they are. So, I know a couple that went 7 times. I've also known an Army colonel that's gone 3 times. And way back when I was talking to a doctor, a colonel out of Hawaii, And he says it starts 7 years later. That stuff starts to happen. Now you have somebody that the recidivism of going back and forth, and especially, but you have the National Guard, as you say, that where the hell are they? You know, and yet some are going, you know, they go there and they have the same type of exposure as we do. What can we do you're not going to stop PTSD. There's no way in the heck you're going to stop it. But how can we reach out to these folks and say, it's okay? Not only to the individual, but to the family. And the family, and this is one of the things that I think a lot of people miss, the family gets hurt. And that's the thing that, all right, not only do you have to counsel the individual, you've got to get the family involved.
So I think there's a couple of questions there. I think the first thing that for the audience here and for the audience at home, I know everybody on the panel feels the same. We're trying very hard, and it has always been PTSD. We're trying very hard to talk about PTSD as PTS. PTS is not a disorder. It is the most normal reaction to the most abnormal circumstance. So one of the things, and I know for the VA, we have to put a disorder underneath it, otherwise you can't put in a claim. But I think part of the destigmatization is recognizing that anybody put in that circumstance is going to come back with difficult memories that they're struggling to process. That doesn't make somebody weak. It doesn't make them less resilient. It just makes them normal. And I think, at least in Resilience Grows Here and all the work that all of us do, we try very hard to help to remind the public that PTSD is not a disorder of somebody who's broken. We have to get rid of this concept of people being broken, because they're not. They're dealing with the unimaginable, and they're usually dealing with it unbelievably well. So who'd like to take the first stab at the question? So why don't we talk about when these problems start to appear when you come home? Does somebody feel like they want to jump in and grab the... Any takers? Left, right? All right, come on, my friend. You know what? You guys can just hand that around.
I don't know if I'm going to start at the beginning, but I did serve in Desert Storm like my fellow counterpart. We do talk a lot of trash between the services, but we bleed the same color red blood at the end of the day. Marines are prettier, to say that. But in the end, we do bleed the same color red. It's like alcoholism, right? You have to admit you're screwed up. I am screwed up. I don't care. But if you can't get to that point and say, you know what, I'm screwed up at sessions. I served in Desert Storm. I served in the invasion of Iraq. I served in Fallujah. We've all served in circumstances. What you can't say is, let me go to the VA or a doctor and take some pills and it's going to go away, because you know it's not going to go away. You cannot unseen the blown up kids, the women. When you're trying to put arms and legs back on a kid who's screaming and you know he's going to die and you're trying to comfort him, you can't take a pill and it magically goes away. It does not magically go away. So their thing is, throw a pill at it, come see me next month. It's not going to go away. I think our generation would be a lot worse if it wasn't for the Vietnam veteran era, because the Vietnam guys said, we got spit on, whatever else, and we know a lot of bad things happen to them. They ensured it didn't happen to our generation. They went out of their way to say, even though America turned its back on us, they were able to go out there and say, hey, there's a difference between the Marine, the soldier, the airman, the sailor who gets sent to Iraq, and the government who's making the decisions. Blame the government if you don't like it, but don't blame the poor guy who's being sent over there against his will. I'm screwed up. He's screwed up. He's screwed up. She's screwed up. Huh? You're screwed up.
And you know, that's stigma. If we can get rid of the stigma and be able to say that, and say that with not feeling like anyone's going to judge us any differently.
I used to be screwed up every week, and then it became every month. and then it became every 6 months, and then it grows with time. And it wasn't because of pills. I came back from Iraq. I went cold turkey on the liquor and the beer because I knew it was going to give me a bad judgment call. Most of us, we naturally probably think about suicide. Doesn't mean we're going to act on it. I think everybody at times of stress does. I stayed off the alcohol, so that time of stress and the alcohol combination didn't want me to put a bullet in my head. I had a staff sergeant of mine. He hung himself in a wall locker. 3 kids. I had another Marine, got out, became a school teacher, 5th graders, put a bullet through his head. We had to make smart choices, and it's not necessarily a pill in the VA. I don't even know if I got off track with the question, really.
And you just do your thing, because that's part of the magic of being able to talk honestly.
But what we do is, I can see this guy or he can see me, and it doesn't matter. I'm a first sergeant. I'm screwed up. There's no stigmatism. We can say, you know, when the state highway patrol came out to me and said, Ben, what do you do that's different in your barn than we do at the psychiatrist? So I said, I try to get him to the psychiatrist. As we said in the video, we know how you feel. I don't have to ask you. Don't look at the flowers on the wall and tell me how you feel. We know how you feel. He knows how I feel. He knows how I feel. We know how each other feel. I'll be honest, we don't want to talk about it. My wife says, you know, I spoke somewhere else the other night. She's like, I never heard that. There's nothing good for you to come up to me and say, well, let's talk about it. What do you want to talk about? The kid who was missing an arm, a leg, the screaming people in the streets. There's different levels of PTSD. There's nothing good to talk. I don't want to bring it back out necessarily. Sometimes I want to sit in this room and he doesn't say a word, and just being together, we heal each other in a sense. And we talk about the dogs or fishing or whatever. It's being with somebody in the presence of somebody and distracting the mind from the demons who are trying to say, you know what, that pistol seems like a good solution right now. When we actually, we know it's not. When your kids, your wife, are no longer a deterrent to suicide, when you've gone to a point so bad that even, I'll tell you, I thought about suicide plenty of times. I would never do it. I was like, oh, I can't do it with a gun because if my kids saw my face disfigured, I'd have to do it with a rope, you know? And you're thinking these thoughts, but you're not going to act on them, but some of them are. And you get to a point where the demons are in your head, and no longer is the beautiful woman to my right who support me, and she's trying to figure out what to do for me. That's why I went cold turkey, because you know, I was feeding fuel to the devil, to the demon in my head, while she's trying to be the angel. I call her my Australian angel, by the way. Angel with an accent. That is cool. All right. So sometimes you got to go cold turkeys when your kids and your family is no longer something that will stop you from preventing suicide because of the peace. I call it going home, like we did in the video. We get picked by God. I know I'm rambling. Stop me if I need to.
Okay, you're doing fine.
We get picked by God to be warriors. It took me 23 plus years to figure it out. I was like, why is God making me see blown up kids, my friends die, women who are screaming? I'm trying to put people's intestines, like we learned in boot camp, and put wet compresses back on their abs so their intestines don't dry out. Why would he put me through this? Because we were chosen to. We were chosen to carry that burden, and we were chosen to take care of each other. And you can't do that with a pill. So many people, think you can. I would tell to the wives, sometimes there's more healing in him sitting next to you without saying a word than if you're pushing. Because you're trying to bring out something he's trying to suppress. It's bad to suppress it in a way, but it's got to come out on his terms, not yours or somebody else. But I'm going to stop rambling.
I think I just want to pick up on something you said there, Ben, that goes back to what you were saying, sir, about how your generation actually paved the way for this generation. And a lot of the healing takes place in the brotherhood. And you don't always have to have worn the same uniform. You've done the same job. And I think some of the power of what RGH has been able to achieve and other groups can achieve is when you just create a space that allows people to sit side by side, and you don't necessarily have to dig down into the deep, dark memories. You just know. And there's a code amongst all that have served. And whenever we have gatherings and there's a, what year did you serve, what branch did you serve, and the moment someone reveals the branch and the year, everybody in the room who served anywhere near knows exactly what they did. They know what they saw, they know what they experienced, and you don't need to say it out loud, you just know it. And there's something about the bringing together of people who just know. And a lot of that is the protective factor. And I think some of where we go wrong is, as Ben suggested, we try to throw pills at this, we try to throw conventional therapies at this, and that alone doesn't work. That in combination with community supports is what works. And the piece that's missing is that the VA has these systems, and maybe one of you would like to talk about the joy of the VA, in that it's trying to get an appointment is one thing. Trying to see the same counsellor more than once is another thing. And then somehow you've got to find a way of putting the pieces back in your life and then come back and be a husband, a father, a son, a provider, and still live with all that's going on in your head. Any of the other guys want to? Here you go, Lee.
Talking about the VA, trying to get in and see the doctor that can actually fix the problem that they can't see, they all think we're lying to each other. And being able to sit with another veteran, they understand where you've been and how you feel, so they don't have to. And like the VFW or the DAV or the American Legion or us being at breakfast on the Thursday mornings, it's a stress relief for me. And being part of RGH has been a big help for me, so.
Rich, words of wisdom.
I know that the VA has made strides in trying to do better, and I've seen them. I think it falls upon some state categories that fall below what should be basically their job is taking care of their patients in a timely fashion. But I don't know. I don't. I see the wheels working to do better for their patients. They have to work with the funding that and the guidelines that they're given.
Absolutely. Of course you can.
I go to the VA. I can talk. I don't think anybody needs me to.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And the PTSD, blah blah blah. Believe it or not. But it's a different scenario. And yeah, I do take some pills and this other stuff. But the Newington branch is like in the boonies. Okay? You get down to West Haven, woo, you go down to the Bronx. I'm a native New Yorker. And in Mount Vernon, well, that's where I live in Westchester County, which is basically where Valhalla is. I went down to the Bronx. Okay, to live it. Out of me.
You can swear here, it's fine.
No, I won't. That lady's here, especially one lady here. And right? And let's get a living. They said there was something, and they put me in whatever. They wanted to take a picture of my body, and they got me in that tube, and they came back MRI. Yeah, MRI, and I just no. It's tired. I mean, that place is tired. Really, really tired. Then I've signed up for something now, the Million Veteran thing, something. And I went up to Massachusetts. And the facility up there should be knocked down and rebuilt. And the folks, the pill thing, throw the pills at it. The problem is PTSD is not a 2-month scenario. It's not a 5-year scenario.
It's a lifelong.
Right? Like you guys, going over and over and over and over, that recidivism that I'm talking about. Non-guys, we're different. We were there. I was there 67, 68. I was there for the Tet offense. I got out, I was there for 4 years in a special unit. Then also, we had life. You know, you didn't have time to think about it. But once the daughter got married and is gone, and God forbid, you know, I lost my first wife. I'm married again. But then you have that time. And now that I'm retired, God damn it, you have more time. And you know,
Put you back to work.
Yeah, exactly, that's why I'm looking to join here.
Join RGH, we'll put you to work.
I cannot watch the news anymore. You know, I can't do that. I put on YouTube and I watch monkeys. Right, and other things, you know, and I'm also watching these survival guys, because.
Not naked and afraid.
No. I know some of these guys are like really, really weird, and I'm going, oh, you know what? They need help, and half of them are the guys that came back, and they're out in the boonies. And you know, you don't have 5 different hospitals in Montana.
And look, I think one of the big issues that we have is that not all of our vets drive. And I know that in RGH we work with a lot of young men and women that, for whatever reason, they've lost their licenses due to DUIs. So how on earth are they meant to make an appointment in Newington if they live in Farmington? If they can't get someone to drive them out there, then how on earth are they going to meet their appointments? And if they don't turn up to their appointments, they get blacklisted at the VA because you didn't turn up on time. And then you go, you know, it's like do not pass go, do not collect $200. So we've created a system that's not workable. And I think a lot of this needs to be in community, and a lot of the support needs to be where people live. And I think the stigma part has a lot to do with that from a local perspective.
But the VA is broken, because if you go in there with a problem and you tell them you have that problem, they can't put it in your file because they're told not to. Yeah. And that's I don't understand that whole process of why. If I've talked to the doctor about it, I go back and look at get my medical file from them, it's not in there. Oh, I can't put it in there because they would fire me or whatever it is. You know, they just don't, you know, and if you go in there with a problem and they can't find the problem, then you're lying to them and you don't have a problem.
And, you know, I think that's one of the invisible wounds of war that we talk about. You know, TBI is a huge one. For those of you that don't know what TBI is, it's a traumatic brain injury. And what we know is many of our combat veterans, if not almost all of our combat veterans, have some type of underlying TBI just because of the nature of the work that they did. You know, you think about our footballers and they slam their heads into each other during practice and on game day. Our heroes go out there and they get blown up. How many times a day when you're actually out there serving this country? So the TBIs underlie a lot of the challenges that our men and women face. And then when they come home with PTS as well, a lot of the symptoms overlap. So diagnosis is really tough, because if it's not a significant TBI, it doesn't show up on an MRI. Yeah. There's no actual evidence that it's there, except for behavioural changes, difficulty concentrating, almost like attention deficit disorder like symptoms that weren't there before they joined the military, but they're sure as hell here now they've come home. And how do you prove that?
Depending on the MOS that you have, you could be, I was an engineer and I'm working with a lot of explosives, and if you're close enough to feel the percussion, you've got some type of TBI happened. I mean, it may not be very much, but I mean, I was in 8.5 years and around a lot of the demolition that we did and all the stuff that we blew up. You know, but you can't prove that. I mean, I can't prove it without them doing, you know, until I'm dead.
Let's not make that happen any earlier.
No, but the thing about the TBI, especially the mild to moderate or the many different concussive blasts that you've been through is hard to undertake. My experience was I couldn't prove it, so I was treated for it. in many capacities, the same as the TBI, any other TBI patient, but I was never approved for it because that's that marker of more compensation for the veteran. But I was, sort of happy to just receive the sort of help, as long as they recognize something was wrong from my records. And yeah, it was tooth and nail fighting, but luckily you find someone that, really wants to do their job. Yeah.
Took me 16 years to get mine looked at and in my file.
And I think part of the disgrace is that less than half of 1% of the American population serve, which means there's 99.5% of the rest of us that have absolutely no right to make it harder for these men and women who come home as our heroes to have to fight for 16 years or to try to prove to somebody that they've got a TBI because they served in the theatre of war where they got blown up every day. If we can throw resources at footballers, what are we doing wrong? Where are our priorities?
Just to give you another perspective on the VA, and they're trying what they can with the funding they have. I came back end of October, beginning November. My wife decided with my kids that she needed to go a different way. So we did. So I say, no, I'm screwed up. I went cold turkey on the liquor. I called 2 different psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, out in town, civilians, because I was trying to hide the fact a little bit. When I told them my scenarios, neither one of them wanted anything to do with me. I said, okay, I'll try the VA. I didn't want to go to the VA, but I said, no, I'll try the VA. I went to the VA. Said, hey, screwed up. Met some nice young lady who was a psychiatrist, I guess. I thought so at the time. Build a report. I felt I could trust her and she was going to unscrew me because we have no clue what's going on, right? We just know we're dealing with stuff. We have no clue what's going on from the war. You come home, your family's gone. Go through the whole summer with her. We built this report. I finally said, this was a person who's going to help me, get me on track, unscrew me. Came about the end of August, she goes, I'm going to turn you over to somebody else. I go, well, why would you turn me over to somebody else? Well, I was an intern. I got to go back to school. So I just built this entire report. I finally said, okay, you know what? I'm going to trust somebody outside my circle of veterans. And I find out that somebody who's in college, I'm her freaking summer project. So I asked her, well, let me know if you get an A on me. But nobody who went through a whole summer and finally built a trust factor in somebody and laid it all out there, hoping that they can unscrew it because you can't figure it out. And now they tell you, well, I'm going to give you somebody else so you can start all over again. It's not going to happen.
You guys are nodding your heads over there. There a shared experience down this neck of the woods?
Oh, yeah. I just kind of summed it up as the way things were, but I feel like every year there's a new provider. There's mental health. And I don't know if it's the hospital, the VA, who's in charge of hiring, if it's an issue with getting better doctors in, or if they're cutting deals with colleges so they can get some sort of medical students to help take a look. But ultimately, it is, sort of a, wow, this is working really well. Oh, now I got to talk to a guy on the screen that's in Utah. Okay, and then now I have to talk to someone. This is, I've been here 2 years and I've had 4. The first one was just a first time meet, and then it was a different, and then, so it was one of those things that I thought it was, I don't know. Yeah,
So
and they wonder why we're reluctant to make our appointments on time, and then, well, and after repeating yourself so many times to different doctors, you want to just give up on that system, and just hope something else better comes along. Things like the vet center or different counselors, or some people find different peers that help, but it's more left up to the veteran sometimes.
And again, let me just, You're next, my friend. I just want to keep coming back to this, and particularly for those folks who are listening at home. If we don't demand better, we're not going to get better. If we don't demand better services, and if we don't fight for those who fought for us, something is horrendously wrong. And, you know, when you listen to the stories of these three heroes, I challenge you to think of a footballer or a sportsman who has a TBI that wouldn't be getting world-class service by the best specialists in this country. And how unfathomable is it that we have three men who risk their lives and walk every single day with the mental health challenges because of the service they provided, that have to dial in to a remote provider or be someone's summer intern project, or I know Lee has a story himself. You know, that is on us. And it's on us to change, and it won't change if we let politicians get away with this. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. Go for it.
The VA is having a hard time getting doctors.
The budget's not going down though,
It's
just
you know,
saying.
Yeah.
And then they keep switching things around.
Mhm.
Every time you turn around, it's, over here. No, but then, as you said, you don't fit the profile. If you ain't in the profile, what do you mean you're not in the profile? You've been in the Army, right? You're in the profile. No, I'm not. And they can't, they know they can understand it, but they're not permitted to understand it because it's up high, that's ching, ching, thinking about the dollar figures. That, oh, well, we have to get a specialist going around, more than, you're talking about how many people are veterans in this country. Granted, we're losing the Great War guys. There's not many of those folks left. And there's only 800,000 of us left now. So, but there's still a bunch of you guys left. And fortunately or unfortunately, I look at it this way, it's a bunch of you guys that are left that aren't totally
Being looked after.
They're missing stuff. And that's just as bad, if not worse. And then, you know, now all of a sudden, yeah, okay, they've got all this manufactured stuff that they're walking around in. Jeez, it's something.
Yeah. Lee, and then we're going straight to Miss Casey because I know what's coming.
I know the last evaluation I had, Terry was with me, and the first question I asked the lady that was doing the evaluation was, where did you serve? Well, I didn't. Well, then how can you evaluate a combat veteran, and that's what we're supposed to be talking about, is the PTSD and all that other stuff. And she got pissed off once I asked that question. But you know, it's just, you know, and then I go down to West Haven to see a neurosurgeon, ask for an orthopedic surgeon for my back, and the VA in West Haven or Newington doesn't have one because they don't have that kind of specialty. You know, I got to go outside to see, and I've had 3 doctors refuse to see me because of the surgery I've already had. But it's crazy that you can't get the treatment you need. Oh, we can go out and fire a weapon and pull the trigger and do what we need to, but once we're done, like they say, you know, mine clearing, expendable. You know, we're expendable and they don't care.
So I think a lot of the symptoms of PTSD and TBI are avoidance and memory loss and lack of attention to detail and all these things that are incredibly important when you have to advocate for yourself, when you have to keep your own records and when you have to remember the details of every appointment and when you have to remember to go to appointments. And the fighting for yourself, for what you deserve, becomes the role of the whole family and the role of the spouse in our particular situation, where I need to become more involved. And these are things that he doesn't want to talk about naturally. And, you know, inviting me into this process has been a really long journey, you know, because one of the symptoms of PTSD is also lack of trust. So even as his spouse, he feels like there's times where he can't trust me with his health. So when you start compounding these issues of, providers that aren't consistent or that you're hesitant to trust, doctors who are not believing what you're saying. Rich was in artillery, and when he goes in and says, I have a TBI because I was blowing things up, and they look at his record and say, well, in order to tick this box for a TBI, you need to have a loss of consciousness in your medical jacket of 30 seconds or more, and he doesn't have that. But I remember when he was in Iraq and he called me and he said his ears had been bleeding for a week. It's these things that you know as a spouse that don't make sense then, but on this end of things, when you're trying to fight for and with him for what he deserves, it becomes incredibly frustrating. It becomes a family ordeal, and we get wrapped up into it as well.
I think one of the things that I just want to hold a space for a moment, Casey and Rich, it's such an incredibly vulnerable space for the two of you to be here tonight, because what it says to the world is, sometimes we struggle like this. We haven't got this sorted yet. We are still fighting. Terry and Lee being here tonight together. You guys still struggle. Another member of RGH, Kimberly Brown, and her husband, Chris. Young couple just like Casey and Rich. To have to hold a space and publicly speak because others are not getting the services, shame on us. Shame on us, and more power to a young couple and young couples and couples who are able to step forward and say, our life's not perfect. This is hard. And part of the community holding space is these heroes are not just the men and women that served, it's the families that receive them when we come home. And as a community, we have a role to wrap around them. These are the people who need our assistance, our help, as their neighbours, as the providers who hold businesses in the communities in which they live. We owe a debt to them to make it okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. And that's not what the picture postcards look like when we come home. What we show on the news are these beautiful moments in airports where everyone's smiling and there's the welcome home. Yeah, welcome home dad signs, and the grandparents are having the kids because we're going off to have a second honeymoon. Check the box, as you say, in 6 months' time. It ain't all easy, but it takes guts to be vulnerable enough to be on a panel and answer questions.
It also takes guts to come out like you two.
Yeah.
This place should be full of people. Granted, we only have 23,000 people in this town, but I bet you at least 300 to 500 of them are veterans, and that's not only male.
Oh, absolutely.
And the ladies are even face more difficult issues than the guys do. And
Here's a wife.
Okay. I've been quiet long enough. No, I have to just say something. Okay, I'm right now kind of, we don't have any children, but I'm in a sandwich situation because I have an elderly mother here in town, and my sister and I have to take care of her medical care. Now, people are living longer now, and their minds are going. So like you guys are going through, what you all are going through, the elderly are going through with more dementia and Alzheimer's, which is exactly the same kind of record-keeping, monstrosity amount of work, dealing with the doctors, making sure the meds are taken. It's all at the same thing. We don't know in this country how to deal with families who are the caregivers to give them the support they need, not only for this situation that we're in, but also for our parents who are getting older. And now we don't even have kids, so I have no idea who's going to take care of us when we get older. When my mind goes, that's it, I'm done. You might as well just chalk up to it because nobody's going to take care of me. I know. But seriously, in this, this Elizabeth Dole Foundation thing I just saw on the news a couple weeks ago, that's interesting. They're focusing on the caregivers for the veterans for veterans, and that's a wonderful thing because we are out there doing that, where the spouses are taking care, but we also have elderly parents, and then there's those who have their kids to take care of. It's pretty amazing, because the medical system in this world does not allow it to be easy anymore. It's very, very difficult. So we do. I have a whole file cabinet of just Lee's records. I have a file cabinet of Mom's records. And now I have a file cabinet of my records, because I'm falling down at this age. So, it's amazing what we have to do. And I think, I fear for people who don't have the capacity to be able to deal with these issues and understand them. Thank God I worked in Congress for a few years, and I know how to manipulate the system a little bit.
And I just want to do a shout out to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation.
Yeah.
One of our Resilience Grows Here members, Kimberly Brown, is actually one of the Elizabeth Dole Hidden Heroes. And she's a fellow, and she's fantastic, and she does exactly what Casey spends her life doing, and fighting for families and helping to connect families with the resources they need, and helping to speak to communities like this. I heard
Here's the one question I have. Like the Vietnam vets that were exposed to Agent Orange can be passed down 4 generations. Is there going to be something that I could pass, that I picked up in the Gulf, and I could pass to Terry, or you pass to your wife or your kids? They haven't looked at that yet.
Well, that's why this million veteran program is going into genetics.
I know.
Like with us, okay, you guys were, my courses, you're going to, you went to heavy metals, right? Which is, depleted uranium, blah, 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 and when they were burning up all the oil fields and stuff, and now, when you go to Afghanistan, you got all the funny little plants that are flipping all over the place, and things like that. So, yeah, that's what you got to look at. We don't know about you, but you, 3 generations down, that of the 23 little chromosomes there, one could have like a little splits in it somewhere because of the heavy metal thing.
What I was going to say is I'm doing a Gulf War study in Boston, and we were exposed to sarin gas, but the VA will never say that.
So I want to just for a moment, because this could be another whole panel discussion, and don't even get us started about burn pits. So Lisa and I, that's a huge bugbear of ours. But I don't want us to. That's really another whole panel, and another whole panel to discuss, what's gone wrong and why we're not recording it the way we are. I just want to throw to the families one more time before we maybe take. I don't know, what time do we have? 8 o'clock, there you go. So one more statement from the families about how is coming home challenging for you? I asked that knowing that Casey's going to laugh at me, because it's like, how do you say that in 5 minutes?
I think what I'd want more the other spouses to understand, and more importantly, what I'd want the community to understand, is what you see are the symptoms of PTSD. You see maybe the anger, you see the avoidance, you see the guy who can't keep a job or is terrible with money. So you just see snippets of what their life might look like, and I think it's easy to categorize it into, oh, he's just not motivated, or oh, he has an anger problem, or wow, he's really irresponsible, he can't get his shit together. Whatever it might be, you're only seeing a snippet of that. But what I would want the community to understand is that there are layers of it, and there's much more to the problem. So if someone has served and you're seeing these types of behavior, stop and ask, because there more than likely is something else going on that you are unaware of, and you might be throwing this veteran into a category, into a bucket that they don't belong in. So don't just write somebody off as a bad employee or a bad friend or an irresponsible person, because you're just seeing the symptoms of PTSD, not the whole picture.
Beautifully said.
I just want to say, in looking at the whole picture, that the spouses are part of, it's not a problem. The problem is, as a Marine or a soldier, we go to war, we defend the country. So in our backs, we're carrying a nation. The people of America, we do not want to expose to what the atrocities that go on, whether it was World War II. We don't want that coming over here. We don't want Korea coming over here. We don't want Vietnam coming over here. those things that we see in those countries over here. So we build a shield as veterans, and when we come home, and your husband comes home, and he's got all these problems, instead of opening up to a spouse, they want to shield them from what they've seen, done. And it's not the right answer necessarily, but they're imagining what they saw in Fallujah, in Desert Storm, in Vietnam. And that's not what we would talk about, but that's what we think we're shielding our spouse from. So we think, what, we'll take care of this, we'll shield it, we won't communicate with them. In my case, my spouse left, which was fine. I've dealt with it. I met another spouse, and she goes, why don't you ever talk about it? Because there's nothing good to talk about. There's nothing good about war. There was I took the kids to church on Sunday. There's nothing good. So we built up a wall that we probably shouldn't. The spouses are trying to break through the wall. We're trying to protect them, so we're putting up more barriers on this wall. So it's actually counterproductive, and we don't even see it, to be honest with you. We don't see it. They're just trying to help, and we're trying to protect them, and we're trying to shield ourselves, and we're trying to maybe let it just go away. The pills ain't going to make it go away. So just trying to make you understand a little bit from maybe his side of the table that we're not doing it purposely. We're not talking purposely to our spouses. It's just we think, in a lot of cases in our mind, that we're just protecting you from the evils that we saw.
I think Rich and I are kind of past that frustration. Like that was certainly an issue years ago, but I think now we've sort of moved to I don't even ask. I just need to know what I can help with to get him through. Whatever he's stuck on, how can I, does he need alone time? Do I need to get him out of the situation? Do we just cancel plans entirely? So I don't need to know the specifics of what he saw or what he did or what the memory or the trigger is. Just what can I do to help? That's really, some days I do that better than others.
I got a question for you. We had a question. Do you think your job was finished? We felt it wasn't.
No.
And being a military type, you were taught to finish your job, no matter what. And we had a talk Monday with a SEAL, and he's going to join the VFW with us. And he's a retired captain. And I talked to him about why we're not doing well where we are right now. And I said, it's the same thing with us. Our mindset is different. We look at collateral damage as something that we try to avoid. The people on the other side, by an expression, they don't give a shit. And the same with us. When we were back in the 60s, the mindset's different. My wife said, well, you're still trying to do your white hat thing, which now I'm trying to do. I said, well, you know what? But that's the way we were taught. We have rules of engagement. And if you got out of rules of engagement, there's a place, what is it, Leavenworth that they talk about? Yeah, I'm not kidding about this crap. But the thing is, we didn't leave it finished. The Korean guys didn't leave it finished. Unfortunately, you guys aren't going to be able to finish it. The only people that seem to have finished it were the World War II guys. But that was total war, and you know what? There was a lot of collateral damage.
And look, I think the other thing that as we're wrapping up, because I'm conscious of the time and we've got young parents with the most beautiful little baby girl you've ever seen in your life, who's the dead spit of a mama. She's like little Casey. I think as we just wrap up, I want to remind particularly the listeners at home and those in the audience that as Veterans Day approaches, please remember it's more than just thank you for your service. Please remember it's every day of the year. And it's not just a platitude in a supermarket. It's taking a casserole around to your neighbour who you know is a veteran, a young veteran family, and saying, how can I help? You know, do you guys get any alone time? Can I look after your child? Can I give you a hand? Like, what do you need? When things are tight and things are tough, it's okay. You can trust us. We're your neighbours and we care about you. That's our job. We mightn't have sworn an oath to uphold the values of the military and to go out there and sign a blank check with our lives, but we sure as heck have a job here. And I think on Veterans Day and beyond, so much of what we need to do is provide those opportunities every single day in the communities in which we live. Any final words of wisdom before we... already 5 minutes over. All right, so thank you so much to our panel. This takes bravery. Thank you to the Simsbury Library.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.